Hello and welcome to the Rask Network. What you're about to hear and see is limited to general financial information only. Please be sure to speak to your financial planner or refer to our financial services guide available at rask.com.au/FSG before acting on the information. Welcome to episode 2 of this retirement mini-series on the Australian Investors Podcast. I'm joined by Drew Meredith from Wattle Partners. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see his book that I'm holding up in front of me. It's called The Golden Years, How to Plan a Happy and Financially Secure Retirement with Jamie Nemsis.
Foreword by Andrew Dermouth.
Foreword by Andrew Dermouth, who, if you don't know, is a made-up character that also happens to sometimes appear on the Australian Investors Podcast. This is episode 2 of our mini-series purely dedicated to retirement. If you're here for some other stuff like stock market wisdom, fund manager interviews,
better luck next time.
Authors that aren't in retirement, I guess, you will be able to get that after this mini-series, or you can fast forward or rewind to some of the other episodes. But we are partway through a 25-question mini-series. What we're doing in these 5 episodes is answering 25 questions on retirement advice, retirement investing, what to do, how to behave, these types of things. And we do have wonderful resources for you. You can take these 25 questions to your financial planner, or when you go and meet with a financial planner in the future, you can take these, or you can simply self-assess. Are they relevant to me? Not all the questions from all the episodes will be relevant to you, and that is why we have kept the episodes short at about 20 to 25 minutes. And you can just hopefully pick up 1 or 2 nuggets of wisdom from each episode, but listen to all 5 so you don't miss anything. Okay, Drew, we are in episode 2. The first question is a punchy one, probably the single most important thing on the mind of anyone in their late 40s, 50s, and early 60s. Do I have enough to retire? Go.
And this is the 2-parter as well.
Well, it's the second part of this is what is the definition of a comfortable retirement? And that's kind of like what people are going for, but do I have enough to retire?
Yeah, I think the second part can actually be more important in leading the first part as well.
Okay, go for it.
So, and there wouldn't be an episode of the Australian Investors Podcast without me saying,
it depends.
It depends. And it does depend so much. I think the comfortable retirement is a good starting point. So there's a group called it's called ASFA. So the Australian Superannuation
something or other
Financial Association, ASFA.
Yep.
They put together a retirement standard, which is an estimate based on certain lifestyles of how much income you need to enjoy that. So they have both a comfortable and a modest retirement.
So they try and put all of that kind of down into like,
you go
generally speaking,
2 dinners a week.
Yeah. How much is it going to cost to have internet in retirement?
You still eat the other dinners, like dinners out a week.
Yeah.
One interstate travel, one international holiday, or some like an interstate caravanning trip. And that's kind of the difference between comfortable and modest.
Let's just reflect on something that you said there as a slight digression. Imagine if you did only have 2 dinners a week. It is turning the 5-2 diet well and truly on its head. For those of you that don't know,
that's not intermittent fasting.
The 5-2 diet is you don't eat a lot of calories for 2 days and then you eat on the other 5. This would be effectively eat all the calories on the 2 days and then nothing on the other 5. Anyway,
and back Association of Super Funds Australia. Otherwise, we'll get a fact check during the week. Association of Super Funds Australia.
We just know it as ASFA.
ASFA. Everyone knows that. We're really good at acronyms, whether it's on this podcast or just in general. They have a retirement standard, and it's international travel, all the kind of things that people expect in retirement. So, for a 65 to 84-year-old, which is where the bulk of the golden years, as we call them.
That's the name of this book.
Yep, exactly.
Go for it.
A comfortable lifestyle is around $72,000 for a couple.
For a couple,
or $51,000 for a single.
So $72,000 for a couple, $54,000 for a single.
Yeah, and I take that as being, I haven't checked this actually.
So let's just say somewhere between 50 and 75 is what people want in retirement, according to this study, which is a bit of witchcraft in that, let's be honest. But that's roughly what people want for a comfortable retirement. Now, some people won't be able to achieve that. Some people will achieve more. I know my in-laws, when I sent them to you, they wanted $80,000 a year, and you said, we've done the numbers. It looks like it's possible.
It's possible.
Yeah, which is great for them. And they were very emotional and very happy about that. So now that we know that, how do we then use that figure to figure out if I've got enough to retire?
So there's multiple ways, and there's much more scientific ways than the way we do it. on this podcast anyway, the way we discuss it, and you've done it before. So the people we generally work with are ones who intend to leave inheritance for their children and want to keep building and growing their assets over a period of time. So what we have is a rule of thumb in our experience over the close to 20 years, not quite 20 years each that we've had in the industry. You can expect to generate an income of a sustainable income of about 5% of your assets every year, and in addition to having growth. And if you think about what the long-term returns from superannuation, they're generally 8 to 10%. So if you're generating 5% income, you're getting 3% growth over the long term, which means that's the average return you'd expect for taking any sort of risk.
So round figures, I got $1 million, I get 5% income.
50 grand a year.
50 grand. And then there's a little bit of growth, which probably keeps me up to date with inflation.
Yeah, exactly. Or allows you the flexibility to draw a little bit more now and then. So if you think a $72,000 comfortable lifestyle, you're looking at 1.4 to 1.5.
Yep.
But that would assume your capital stays intact.
And it probably would assume that you own a house.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you're not paying rent in that generally. You already own a house and you're not paying mortgage repayments.
But keep in mind, folks that are listening to this, if you don't have 1.5 million at retirement, there are incentives for you or safety nets if you don't own a home. Yep. Things like the government.
Age pension.
These
types of
things.
I think if you've got assets below $800,000, then you can access the age pension. That'll provide a base level of income as well.
So when you see that in your financial model, ladies and gentlemen, what you'll see the big bulky bit of your retirement, and then it slowly falls as the forecasts come down and you start to use that income. But then there'll be this flat line that comes at a certain point in time, which is the government safety net kicking in.
I think the numbers suggest somewhere to get 72,000, I think it's like 1.1 or 1.2 million would be enough on actuarial. So based on your life expectancy and having no money left when you die.
And then running it down to zero.
Yeah. The problem is retirement isn't linear. There's what we talk about in the book. There's periods where you spend a lot more and there's periods when you spend a lot less. And there's shocks that happen, whether it's a market shock, a legislation shock, a family shock, that changes the trajectory completely. So that's why we always base it. This is like a margin of error where we're saying 5% income is achievable because we know it keeps our capital generally intact, which means we'll be able to navigate those things more easily and probably leave some for the children as well. But you can achieve that level of income at a lower asset base, and there's plenty of models. We were talking in the office yesterday that suggested a lot of the models are very focused on accumulators. A lot of the investment models are all about the compounding rather than managing longevity, and everything relies on a life expectancy table rather than no one knows when they're going to pass. So it's hard to plan for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and we just round that up. So if you say you need 100,000, and this is we always talk in after tax, which kind of shocks a lot of clients we talk to. If you're in your 50s, you've always paid income tax. If you use superannuation, which will be in another episode, effectively. That's
actually my next question. So go on.
Exactly. If you use superannuation effectively, this income can be tax-free, fully after tax, which means you need less assets to produce it. You'd need probably a third more if you were producing this.
If you were 40.
Income tax, exactly.
So question number 7 in our series thus far is, we did promise 20 to 25 minutes, so just keeping time. How do I know if I've got a good superannuation fund? You often talk about, and you and Jamie often talk about having 2/3 in super and 1/3 out, not including the house. So having majority of your money in super for those tax benefits, which you just mentioned.
Yep.
How do I know if I've got a good super fund? That was one of your tips from episode 1, was like, review your super fund. Yeah. How would you review a super fund?
I'm going to assume this is for mass market. Yeah. So My Super products. So My Super is like the default funds that you can get. Australian Super,
Hostplus,
but even things like Mercer and the corporate super plans have
like Telstra
My Super products.
They have a My Super strategy.
Yeah, it's like a default balanced growth or growth fund that you go into. The good thing about it's how do I know if I have a good one? It's probably more about how do I know if I have a bad one, and that's what the whole industry is based on at the moment. So APRA, the regulator, Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority.
I'm going to ask you what NASA stands for in a second.
APRA has a heat map that comes out every quarter that reviews every My Super fund for fees, performance, member benefit, all that, and it has a heat. Basically, tells you if you're one of the red ones, your fees are too high or your performance isn't good, and the combination of the two. And they're actually forcing funds to close if they're underperforming or they're too expensive, and forcing them to merge with other ones. So, but there's we look at a number of things, and for us, how do I know if I have a good super fund? A good super fund for me could be a very bad super fund for you. So it's how do I align that super fund to my situation and what I want? And the biggest change here for us is retirement. So most super funds, my super, the average age would be somewhere in the late 20s, early 30s of the members. So naturally, they're very growth focused and long-term and not income focused. So having a good super fund is having a super fund that's linked or related to your stage of life. And unfortunately, retirement products from a lot of the mass market ones aren't particularly good yet. So top tips for comparing, always compare fees. Just to make sure they're competitive. You don't always want the cheapest. We know, paying lowest cost doesn't mean you're getting. Sometimes you're the product. Yeah. I hate comparing investment performance because you naturally you're
biased towards the one that looks good.
Exactly.
In the past,
or you're only really looking at performance if they're incredibly bad,
right?
Because if they're incredibly, I think you want to go at the ends of the bell curve on performance.
So you don't want the one that's done really well over the last 5 years.
You don't want the one that's done really bad.
Or the one that's really bad. You want to be somewhere
what that tells you is they're just straying too far from what should be a fairly straightforward conservative approach. In retirement, you just want 7, 8, 9, 10% per annum. Big, regular chunk of income and not taking huge risks. And if you're getting a great return one last year, it's probably because you had too much in tech. You had a bad return the previous year, it's probably because you had too much in bonds. So you're swinging too much. So I think you want less variability. I'm swinging a bit.
Yeah, you've got some hands going on here, ladies and gentlemen.
Less variability in returns. And I think big for us is transparency and the way they deal with members as well. So it's understanding where you're invested and what's driving your returns, and then making sure it's aligning with how you feel as well. So
okay, so I got low fees, probably want below 1% overall.
Yeah,
industry fund.
There's 3 different fees, obviously. There's
that's the key
member fee, an admin fee, and then an advice fee.
Yeah. So this is the key thing, folks. 2 things with your super fund. If you say you're with Australian Super, that actually doesn't mean anything to me. I know that you're with the biggest institution, but your strategy is what matters. Are you growth, high growth, indexed,
balanced,
ethical, whatever?
Yeah.
That's the thing you need to focus on, because depending on which one you choose would depend on what fees you pay for that strategy. That's a really important distinction. For example, Host Plus, which was mentioned in the Barefoot books, which is a great, wonderful book, that mentions the really low-cost index option of 0.02% in fees. But if you look at all the other Host Plus strategies, they're super expensive. So if you happen to make the mistake of not picking the right one once you get in there, you've ended up in a very expensive strategy. So look at this strategy. The fees that Drew mentioned, there's an admin fee, which is often expressed as $100 a year or $2.50 a week, or that's to cover the cost of the actual super fund.
Comparable to a platform fee for Hub or
like a brokerage fee, or something, I don't know, something like that. So you just want to isolate those 2 things. Look at the long-term performance, not short-term, definitely not short-term. You do not want to be looking at last year's performance being like, oh, well, that one was better last year. That's a mistake. The other thing is look between the goalposts, so not just the really good ones and the really bad ones. Look in the middle. So that's a really good piece of advice. Thank you, Drew. Now, I should give a special call out. This series is in no way sponsored by Wattle or sponsored by this book. But the reason is I saw this book on the kitchen table. Someone must have just left it out there after they were like, what's that thing? And just put it down. This book, The Golden Years by Drew and Jamie, if you can't afford to see a financial planner right now, go and pick up the book. It is, I don't know how much, but I can't imagine it's more than, say,
$32.95.
Yeah.
I think Amazon's already got it on sale.
It's that good. Put it on sale straight away. Amazon, Jeff Bezos is sitting there going, guys, we've got too much of this book. 165 pages, really easy to read, nice pages, published by Major Street Publishing. Yeah. Pick it up at a good bookstore or online. And by the
typed while I was fingerless.
He had an injury, if you may remember. But interestingly, with this book, you can get it on sale, actually. There is a discount code through the Major Street Publishing website that they've given to us at Rask. So anyone who uses that coupon code or link can get it cheap. So the next question, number 8 in our series, and we've got to speed this up, is when is a good time in your life to retire? How do I know that it's the right time?
Never. Never retire.
What?
It wasn't the answer we're looking for.
It's a book about retirement.
I think one of the big stories in here that is retirement is different for everyone. And some people are forced into retirement and some people never really retire. Like they either find work or they find volunteering or they find other passions. So there's no fixed time to retire. I think one of the big things and one of the big value adds that we provide is being able to tell people that they can. and then it's up to them. Whereas so many people get forced in and they have no idea whether they're in a position to fund their own retirement or what retirement will look like. So I think there's no simple answer, but it's when you're emotionally ready, which financial planners aren't necessarily skilled at that part. But it's, one of our sayings is to enjoy life in your retirement. And we try and help do that by taking care of the money side and making sure you can have that income that replaces your salary income that you've earned for the last however many years. So how do you know it's the right time to I don't think everyone knows. I think some people are shocked when they get made redundant and then it takes years to kind of adjust or they go and seek work. I think, but so much is about making sure you're informed of your financial position and then understanding what that means and what retirement would look like. That probably makes the decision as to when to retire a lot easier.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Next question is, this is a very dicey one. It might, some people might get a bit, they might feel a rush of blood come and they might think, oh, this Drew fella, what did he say about my property? Is property a good investment to help me fund my retirement, Drew?
Do we want headlines or we just want straight bat?
Wow, we're going to go straight to the Australian Financial Review with this one. No, tell us, is it, I deal with a lot of people in their 40s and 50s and 60s who choose to invest with us and they have a lot of property and they want out. So
I think, and at a higher level, you've got two types of investment, property and share markets, and both have returned somewhere between 8 to 10% per annum for the last 20 or 30 years. So investing, it's all good.
As long as you are investing,
you're
it's
involved
good.
In the market. Doesn't mean every property does well. Doesn't mean every share does well. But you're investing and you've got some sort of discipline around it. From like an anecdotal perspective, we're seeing a lot of clients sell that have investment property, 1, 2, 3, even more, selling those investment properties as they come into retirement and shifting that more into liquid assets. So shares, bonds, term deposits, all these things that can be traded every day. Yep.
But they also produce positive income.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the next step is that one, in Victoria, where we're based, there's been a whole lot of changes to land tax rules, which are making it much more expensive to own an investment property. But more broadly, you've seen the paradigm
shift.
I was like, which words am I using? I've seen the paradigm shift significantly. So when interest rates were 0 and you were getting, 0.5 and you were getting 3 or 4% rent or 3% rent on your property and costs and land tax wasn't bad, that was, it was pretty good. And you're getting pretty good capital growth at the same time because interest rates were so low. But now you can get 4.5% a term deposit. And as far as I can tell, most properties after costs are yielding something like 2 or 2.5, even less, sometimes not negative. It kind of makes it makes a lot more sense to be having less risk, less leverage, and more diversification by holding a more diverse range of assets rather than one. You've got single tenant risk, you've got repairs, you've got maintenance. On the alternative side, you could hold 50 different investments, some yielding 10%. You've had senior secured bonds, some yielding 5%, ASX listed shares, and combine all that and get a higher income that's more resilient to multiple kind of outcomes in the economy.
Interesting point to make here is that people know me, I guess, as kind of like a share investing kind of guy, ETFs, that type of a thing. But we also invested a shed load of money in the Australian Property Podcast. That's our other podcast, one of our biggest podcasts at Rask, and 2 of the best or 3 of the best hosts in the country. I think they are the best hosts in the country. Well, in property, says I. But no. They are wonderful. Pete, Amy, and Chris, absolute lords of their industry. And even they will tell you that property has its pros and cons. And I think a wonderful use case of property is to grow wealth. Yeah. But then as you transition to retirement, one of the things you absolutely want is passive income, as you said.
And a diverse range of passive income.
Exactly. So it makes sense to use the tools for the job and then move on. And if you treat it that way, I think you'll give yourselves the best opportunity to grow wealthy and stay wealthy. Okay, we've got, it is 19 minutes by my watch, so we have to move on to the last question. Before I get you to just give us a bit of a takeaway, this is one that kind of relates to property, which is, should I prioritize the repayment of my mortgage or my superannuation contributions? Drew, there are 2 different types of superannuation contributions, which our community should be aware of by now. You can make concessional or before tax. That includes the super guarantee if you're employed.
Yep.
That at 1 July, that is changing to $30,000 a year. Then there's non-concessional, which is where you do a big lump sum and you do not claim a tax deduction for that.
You don't pay contributions tax on non-concessional. You only pay that on concessional.
On the way in, meaning that the super fund will withhold 15% of your. So if you
concessional,
if you put $29,999 in, or 30 grand, let's keep it round figures. If you put 30 grand in on 1 July, and that's the only thing you put in for the full financial year, and you claim a tax deduction, the super fund will withhold 15% of that money.
$4,500.
Yeah, so not the full amount would go in, and that's important to understand. The other option does have implications down the track, but so the people can get their head around that bit. I should probably put money in super because it's lower tax and it can compound, and someone else does it for me.
Yeah.
But then I've also got a bit of a mortgage left here, Drew. Should I be prioritizing paying down that while interest rates are high? What would you suggest?
I think if you're in your 50s and fast moving towards retirement, then your focus should be on repaying your mortgage as much as possible and speeding that up. Ultimately, it's going to free up significant cash flow that you can then direct into superannuation. And one of the big changes that's happened, so if you meet the work tests, you can contribute up, you can do concessional contributions up to 75. If you don't meet the work test, you can still do non-concessional contributions up to 75. So that used to cut off at 65, in which case you would think about doing super contribution sooner. Yep. But now that that's more open, it's prioritize that mortgage. Interest rates are like 6-7%. That's eating up a lot of your after-tax income. So prioritize that and then start shifting to super contribution. And you've got a pretty good runway to maximize that in the next.
In the interest of time, I'm going to ask a follow-up here. And I know this could blow out to a whole episode. But how about if someone has been a sole trader, like a tradie, or work for themselves, and the other partner stayed at home taking care of the kids for a long time? Their super balances are quite low.
Yeah.
Should they, and they're still self-employed, so they don't have to necessarily pay themselves super. Yeah. Should they be at least contributing some? Like as in, should they, because if we assume that someone's working in a corporate job and they're getting 10% super contributions automatically from their employer, is that a different conversation to someone that's self-employed?
I'd definitely most people self-employed are looking for tax deductions as well, as far as I've seen.
A lot of them are. I can vouch for that.
So, and in most cases, we'd be saying maximize your concessional contributions if you're on a salary, above, I guess, 150, in the hundreds. Probably you're trying to maximize your concessional up to 27,500 because of the tax deduction. But you generally still, if you've got debt outside, you'd generally still be holding back on non-concessional contributions.
Okay, non-concessional contributions. I got you.
Being after tax, Okay. So you're using it for the tax benefits while adding to that compounding, but not locking more up. And it does depend. I mean, if you're close to 60, one of the preservation age is you can start accessing your super from 60 if you retire. Yeah. So if you're closer to 60, well, then everything is open. If you're in your early 50s or late 40s, then obviously you're looking at least 10 years until you can access it. So
mortgage.
Yeah.
And then maybe looking at super.
That's why,
as a secondary.
Particularly in 40s and early 50s.
Okie dokie. So we've covered things like, do I have enough to retire? You mentioned the comfortable retirement rule. We can put that, I'll just pop that down in my notes here, ASFA. So I'll put that down and you can see what goes into the calculations around a comfortable retirement. Then we talked about knowing what super fund is like right and the strategy that's right for you. You can follow Drew's rules. I think you mentioned a report there, a quarterly report. What was the quarterly report for superannuation funds? APRA's heat map. APRA heat map. So I'm going to put that in my notes too. I'm going to pop that down here. APRA heat map. And then we talked about prioritizing the mortgage over superannuation. Now, final question, which each of these 5 episodes in this mini-series have this question in a different way. So in the last episode, I asked, if you're in your 50s, what would you do in the next 12 months? If you're in your early 60s, so you mentioned 60 before, early 60s, what should someone who listens to this do over the next 12 months to help them prepare for retirement?
So 60 is the most important age for superannuation. It's a condition of release if you're 60 and retire, but also once you're over 60, most people can take their superannuation benefits completely tax-free. So in early 60s, what we'd be trying to do is get as much of all your assets that you have, doing it again, into superannuation. So use non-concessional contribution caps, use concessional contribution caps, and try to, in our view, for a lot of people, you want to have at least 2/3 of your assets within the super environment. And 1/3 outside, preferably, get 100% in if you can, but that can be limited.
Yep.
So it's very much just be throwing everything you can at that superannuation environment, knowing that it is completely cashable once you retire.
Yep.
But you're not really restricted once you retire from taking all that money out.
So all those things that we say about super money being locked up at this age is basically not locked up.
As
so
long
you
as
may
you're
as well do
retired,
it. Yeah. So you just got to play that carefully. Get advice if you need it. There's a link in your show notes that says financial planning. You can be matched with a financial planner. Drew's book, The Golden Years. Jamie and Drew would love it if you pick up a copy of the book. There are some copies in the office. So if you do happen to be in Melbourne, swing by and say, hey, Drew said he'd give me a book, even if he didn't, and just see what happens. So we have approximately exactly 15 more questions to go. So we have 3 episodes to do that, Andrew. We've covered 10 already. All of the links that we reference to resources and stuff are in the show notes, in your podcast player, in YouTube, in the description below. Head to the website, create yourself a free Rask account, and you can get the 25 questions for retirement advice to give to your financial planner to, take and do what you want with it. But it's a free thing. It's available in your show notes.
I feel like it's actually 40 questions because there's like multiple 2-prongers in there. And
Well, I mean, 25 is a good round number because 25 divided by 5 equals 5.
Number blocks, yep.
So this is what we've got 5 episodes and we did 25. But there are about 400 questions I would actually have. So there's a 2-parter. So please go and check out the resources in your show notes and get in touch with a financial planner. Drew from Wattle Partners, thanks for joining me.
Good to see you.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.